This week, we've seen the ECHR's latest power grab in a case that was brought by a group of Swiss elderly women on the subject of climate change. The court has ruled that according to the right to life, the right to private life and the right to family, that governments have to essentially go with net zero policies. And this is just the latest example. We can't deport migrants because of the rulings of the ECHR. And this is a straightforward attack on democracy. So I think that before this government is out, that the Conservative government need to pull themselves together and take us out of the ECHR, because I think this is a serious threat to democracy. What do you think, Albie?
I'm open to leaving the ECHR, but people that are advocates of leaving the ECHR need to answer some pretty serious questions about some pretty serious problems. I'll start with two of them. The Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which of course is underpinned by the ECHR, and also the EU-UK trade agreement, which is underpinned by the ECHR. Now, you answer how we solve those problems and leave the ECHR, then we can have a conversation. But if you're just going to sit here and say, oh, I don't like a ruling that the ECHR did, so we should leave, without thinking about some of the consequences, then that's just not a serious proposal.
Well, I think you have to look at it in the other direction, that there are consequences to this ruling, because this is essentially using legislation to promote a particular political ideology. And the argument that is often made by opponents of leaving the ECHR is that there'll be some kind of, we'll be like Russia. Russia is the only
Sorry,
country
Emma, but that's not my argument.
No, I understand that. But if you, I understand that.
I
understand that. But if you let me finish my point, point, I'll come to that.
2 hours, Emma.
You're
so rude.
Go on then, Benjamin. Jump in there. You've got something to say.
For the last 20 minutes, you are so rude.
I think it is important to say that in this country, British rights have always been based on parliamentary judgment, and it's just ignorant of British legal history to suggest that, and I'm not saying this is what you're doing, Albie, but to suggest that we would suddenly not have those protections in law.
I've not heard anything about the Good Friday Agreement or the EU-UK trade agreement.
There would be ways in which we can shore up those things, but the reality is that the argument is that it's a threat to the Good Friday Agreement. Well, it's a threat to the whole of the United Kingdom if we stay in the ECHR.
I'm more concerned that this court of unelected officials have deemed climate change a 100% settled, nailed-on thing, when actually 99% of scientists, they say, agree. Fine, there's still 1% according to them. There's still 1% of people who are sceptical about the full impacts of climate change, exactly how much man has an impact on climate change, and also people that are concerned about the data set. We're dealing with data from, say, some people are posting charts from a couple of hundred years. You do that on a chart for a stock or an asset like gold, and you take the 1 minute chart and say, oh, look at this line, it's gone up. You go broke immediately. So, the facts that the court have said that climate change is completely man-made and it's not cyclical is, more disturbing for me than, what Albie's talking about, saying that we're going to break the Belfast Agreement.
They're wading into a contentious political debate.
And
the judge was actually very clear that there's a conflict between democracy and right, and when there's a conflict, that it's the ECHR that gets to decide, because, the Swiss had a referendum.
I don't think it's a contentious political debate. I think it's one that all people of sound minds have settled. I don't think we need...
It's not settled.
I don't think we need the Bitcoin bro take on climate change trajectories. I think the scientists know a bit more than you.
I would also point out scientists that don't want to be defunded, perhaps.
I would also point out that you talked about unelected judges. Well, none of our judges are elected, mate, so that would make absolutely no difference. That's not how our legal and justice system works. It was only 15, 20 minutes ago when we were listening to the headlines that one of the main stories tonight is the record temperatures in Spain and the Canary Islands. 38 degrees in Spain. We looked at last year.
That's not that hot.
It's very hot.
Not.
It's very hot.
Don't spend a summer in Greece or Spain.
Why should this be a matter of right rather than a matter of parliamentary and democratic decision? Do you not trust the British people to make their own decisions?
Trust me, the British people do not agree with you. The British people are overwhelmingly understanding of
climate change. Put it to a referendum then, Benjamin.
And the fact is...
On the ECHR, that's not true.
I'm talking about climate change. And the fact is that when you don't have policies in place by governments to deal with this extreme rise in temperatures, the kind of consequences such as flooding that we're getting in extremes that we've not seen before, then you have scenarios where people cannot leave a basic life, and that is a breach of their human rights.
I still am not clear how you that want to leave the ECHR want to solve the problems that come up with the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the EU-UK trade agreement, both agreements who worked very hard to come to an agreement.
Is that down to us to sort out?
Well, I think if you are going to, yes, I think if you're going to propose something like leaving the ECHR and say, oh, it's going to be easy, tell us how we're going to do it.
Who said it was going to be easy? We're saying it's possible and it's necessary.
Yeah, from the people
common
that sold you
travel
Brexit.
area predates the European Union. It predates the ECHR. We still had that after the ECHR because guess what? It's not beyond the wit of man to get together with a court system as robust as ours, going back 1,000 years all the way to the Magna Carta, and be able to sort these issues out. The Belfast Agreement didn't bring about peace on the island of Ireland. Defeating the IRA brought about peace on the island of Ireland.
We should just do away with the Good Friday Agreement.
Well, actually, I would argue that we should, yes.
Darren Grimes.
Yes, I do.
You think
yes,
we should get rid of the Good Friday Agreement?
I think it's...
Did you mean to say that?
Yes, I did.
Why?
I think it's a menace that is ensuring that unionism in Northern Ireland is under threat and that we have
How
to
is
have
it
the
under
Windsor...
threat?
Because of the Windsor framework that your favourite man, Rishi Sunak, signed.
And sorry, did the Windsor framework not happen because the people who argued for Brexit did not consider Northern Ireland at all?
Of course,
a little bit,
Your historical inaccuracy.
A little bit like people who are arguing in favour of leaving the ECHR aren't thinking about Northern Ireland.
This is a complete red herring because there's no reason why climate change should be a matter of rights. Why should this be a matter of the ECHR to decide? There is also
humans' existence to have a safe and secure...
This is nonsense,
Do you know what undermines my right to...
The extreme flooding in Bangladesh that wiped out a third of the country for part of last year is wiping out their human rights.
Do you know what's wiping out
when you look at the extreme flooding in Germany...
So is the NHS about human rights? Is the NHS waiting list about human rights? Where do we stop?
Exactly.
Do we just let courts decide everything and just do away with democracy?
Judges deciding what rights are.
I trust the electorate.
Their opinions. And what I would say is that where are the rights of those girls who have been sexually abused or indeed raped in this country by people that we can't deport because of your favoured foreign court? I think you're a damn disgrace to make that argument because you know for a fact we are not keeping women and girls safe in this country.
Show your lack of understanding of the ECHR. This isn't a foreign court that imposed on us. This is our values and our outlook that we shared with the rest of Europe.
So then there won't be a problem with us leaving it then because there's no threat to it being done away with if we leave the ECHR.
Well, the truth is, you talk about climate
because the point is that their interpretation of this is rogue. They are creating law and imposing it on us with no democratic accountability. That is unacceptable. This is mission creep. It's a power grab.
So I assume you think it's right that we go to net zero by 2050?
No.
OK, but you just made your whole argument saying that we must do what the democracy wants. Well, the population of this country has overwhelmingly voted for net zero by 2050 because it was in the Labour, Lib Dem, Tory and Green manifestos.
You seem to misunderstand.
And so, hang on, you just made your argument. If the people vote for it, it happens. The people voted for those manifestos, and yet you don't think it should happen.
I know you think you're being clever.
I think you're being a hypocrite.
No, I know you think you're being clever, but you seem to not understand how democracy works. Because I am perfectly entitled to have a different opinion to the majority of the electorate, if that is the case. But I would like to see that put to a vote. Let's have a referendum on the ECHR. Let's have a referendum on net zero, and then we'll see whether or not the electorate agrees with me.
Why do you want a referendum? The last referendum was so divisive. I supported Brexit. I don't want to see another referendum in this country in my lifetime. It divided this country down the middle. We're still recovering. We're still recovering from the division now.
We're recovering from democracy.
You want not just one, but two referendums. One on net zero and one on ECHR membership.
I find that absolutely extraordinary. You sit there and you say, I voted for Brexit, yet you want a foreign court to dictate our border policy and our climate policy.
I didn't say that.
In fact, no.
If you listen,
that we shouldn't leave the ECHR.
No,
what is the consequence of not leaving the ECHR?
Darren.
What is the consequence of not leaving the ECHR? I answered that question already.
Darren,
please
don't patronise me.
What is the answer?
Darren, shut up a second. I'm talking to you.
Don't talk to me like How dare you think
said
you can
at the
sit there and
beginning,
talk
I
to
am
me like
open
that?
to leaving the ECHR.
I will not be hectored by some posh man on our panel.
I wanted some answers to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the
gave you
EU-UK
them.
trade
Look,
agreement.
let's
no
move
one has
on
been
then.
able
Let's
to give
move
me
on.
one.
Because
And you
Alfie
still
wants to
haven't.
repeat himself
I'm
over
not.
and over again. He
Give
likes
me an
the sound
answer.
of his own voice.
Give me an answer.
I did answer that question.
You didn't.
I did. Yes,
You didn't.
I did.
You didn't.
I absolutely did.
You did not.
There's no
Absolutely
reason why. I mean,
extraordinary.
they answered your question. Is there's no reason why that can't be dealt with through Parliament and through domestic law. It doesn't need to be dealt with through the ECHR or in terms of rights, because this is an inappropriate subject to be wrapping into the issue of rights.